I would like to speak on the recent recall election that took place in California for the position of governor. Now, as we know, there was the pretty random, in a sense, recall election where the people were essentially tasked with deciding whether or not they wanted to keep Gavin Newsom as the governor. And the person that emerged as his strongest competitor, even though he got destroyed in the end, was Larry Elder, who was essentially a far right radio host. Okay, now there were a plethora of others that were running as well, notably Caitlyn Jenner, although maybe not as notably, considering the fact that she only got literally 1% of the vote, which is hilarious and also sad. But upon seeing the results of this election, I was reminded of something that I try not to think about, but it's hard not to because it's in our face. And with the midterms and the next presidential election approaching, the Democrats need to do something about this, and they need to do this quick, fast, and in a hurry. So Gavin Newsom won by a landslide. It wasn't even close. He destroyed the competition. It was essentially just the Californians just doing something they felt like was routine. They stepped in. They said, "Nah, we don't want the far right crazy guy. We'll rather keep the typical neoliberal that we have." Although that probably wasn't their line of thinking, but it was something of the sort I would like to imagine. Now, Larry Elder basically campaigned on, Trumpism. It was, anti-mask, anti-vaccine, anti-vaccine mandate, things of that nature. Just a bunch of far right lunacy, a bunch of conservative nonsense. And it didn't resonate with the Californians as was expected because California is a deep blue state. And he lacked populism. He lacked things that could rouse certain groups of the population up. And in the end, Gavin Newsom came away with the victory. Also, in regards to the mask mandates, Californians are much more in support of them than I assume the conservative people thought originally. So 2/3 of Californians either think that the mask mandates imposed by the Democrats over there are just right or not enough. A minority of them thought that it was too much. So there you go in terms of the mask mandates. But what this election did for me was it exposed a problem that the Democrats are still trying to get through in the era of Mr. Donald Trump. So I just referenced this term Trumpism. Now, Gavin Newsom used this term quite a bit in his defense of, him keeping his job, I guess, away from the likes of a Larry Elder. Now, the problem with this is that was his only line of attack. It was this guy's extreme. He's correct. This guy is insane. He wants to get rid of the COVID mandates, which and COVID protections, which Californians promote and accept, which I just highlighted. 2/3 of them are in favor of these things, but that's all he had. And if you harken back to the most recent election with Joe Biden, that's all he had against Donald Trump. It's, oh, this guy's bad. He's terrible. You saw what he did. Yada, yada, yada. That was pretty much it. That was all that he had to say. And that is a message that will only strike to provide you success at the right time in the right moment. That is not something you can continue to rely on. And that's the problem here. They're reliant on this anti-Trumpism feeling in the country that will continue to allow them to coast to re-election and win elections. That won't last forever. In fact, I doubt, and I think I'm right when I say it won't last until the midterms. It helped in the presidential election because people were so fed up. And it wasn't a pro-Biden election. It was an anti-Trump election. That's what it turned out to be. And this recall election wasn't a pro-Gavin Newsom election. It was a anti-Trumpist, far-right Republican election with Larry Elder representing those traits. So they're going to have to find something new. They're going to have to pick something up. And I'm going to get into a story later where, there's reports that poverty was decreased last year due to all the federal spending and stimulus checks. Talk about that. Talk about how you can materially improve people's lives. They need to figure out a different line of attack to get people to flock to the polls and vote for them. Because one thing we know about Republicans is that they come out and vote. They have very strong turnout, especially in like midterm elections, local elections, all the rest. And if Democrats can't do something, can't come up with an effective strategy other than Trump is bad and people like Trump is bad, and that the Republican Party is the party of Trump, then the future doesn't look good for them. In fact, it looks very bleak. So hopefully they can come up with something, but knowing the Democrats, they probably won't because they're incredibly weak and feeble and they just don't have good messaging whatsoever. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens.